There's a strange convergence happening at the intersection of ancient prophecy and cutting-edge physics. Michio Kaku, one of the world's most prominent theoretical physicists, has noticed something deeply unsettling. The apocalyptic visions described in religious texts thousands of years ago, the end-times prophecies that seemed like pure mythology or spiritual metaphor, are beginning to echo in the cold, mathematical predictions of modern science. Not because physics is validating supernatural predictions, but because both ancient seers and contemporary scientists are describing the same fundamental vulnerabilities built into the fabric of existence itself. This isn't about validating any particular religious tradition or claiming that prophets had scientific knowledge. It's about recognizing that humanity has always sensed its own fragility, and now physics is giving us the precise mechanisms by which everything could end. The apocalypse, it turns out, isn't just possible. According to the laws of thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, and cosmology, it's inevitable. The only question is which form it takes and when. Kaku approaches this topic with the analytical mind of a physicist, but also with the awareness that these aren't just abstract calculations. These are scenarios that could unfold within our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes. The end of the world isn't scheduled for some distant cosmic future. Multiple apocalyptic scenarios sit on hair triggers right now, waiting for the wrong sequence of events to activate them. Start with the most immediate threat, nuclear apocalypse. The Book of Revelation describes stars falling from heaven, seas turning to blood, and fire consuming a third of the earth. For centuries, this seemed like purely symbolic language. Then, on July 16, 1945, humanity detonated the first atomic bomb in the New Mexico desert. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita as he watched the explosion. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Kaku points out that we now possess the technical capability to fulfill the apocalyptic prophecies literally. A full-scale nuclear exchange between major powers would create firestorms that block out the sun, produce nuclear winter, poison water supplies with radioactive fallout, and potentially render large portions of Earth uninhabitable for generations. The imagery of ancient prophecy, fire from the sky, darkness covering the Earth, water becoming undrinkable, these aren't metaphors anymore. They're accurate descriptions of nuclear war's aftermath. What makes this particularly chilling is how close we've come to accidental apocalypse. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the world sat on the knife's edge for 13 days. Soviet submarines, out of contact with Moscow and under attack by US depth charges, came within one vote of launching nuclear torpedoes. A single Soviet officer, Vasily Arkhipov, refused to authorize the launch. One man's decision prevented World War III. In 1983, Soviet early warning systems detected incoming American missiles. Protocol demanded immediate retaliation, but the officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, made a judgment call that the readings were false. He was right. A malfunction in the satellite system had mistaken sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. Again, one person's decision prevented global annihilation. These near misses reveal something terrifying. The apocalypse doesn't require malice or evil intent. It can happen through accident, miscalculation, or technical failure. The systems we've built are complex beyond any human's ability to fully comprehend them, and as Kaku notes, complex systems fail in complex ways. But nuclear war is just the beginning of the apocalyptic scenarios that physics predicts. Climate change represents a slower motion apocalypse, but no less catastrophic in its ultimate implications. The Book of Revelation speaks of scorching heat, failed crops, and mass death. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's reports read like secular translations of these prophecies. Kaku emphasizes that climate change isn't a future threat. It's happening now, and the physics is brutally simple. Carbon dioxide and methane trap heat in the atmosphere. We're adding these gases faster than natural processes can remove them. Temperature rises, ice melts, sea levels increase, weather patterns destabilize. Agricultural systems that feed billions begin to fail. The feedback loops make it worse. As Arctic permafrost melts, it releases methane that's been frozen for millennia. That methane causes more warming, which melts more permafrost, which releases more methane. As ice sheets disappear, less sunlight gets reflected back into space. The darker ocean and land absorb more heat, accelerating the melting. These positive feedback loops can create runaway scenarios where the system crosses tipping points and enters new, potentially irreversible states. Venus provides a cautionary tale. Once, billions of years ago, Venus might have had oceans and a climate not too different from Earth's. But a runaway greenhouse effect transformed it into a hellscape with surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead and atmospheric pressure 90 times greater than Earth's. The laws of physics that govern planetary atmospheres don't care about human civilization. If we push the system too far, it will find a new equilibrium, with or without us. The prophetic literature speaks of plagues and pestilence. Modern biology and epidemiology confirm this threat with mathematical precision. Kaku points to how interconnected our world has become. A virus can travel from a remote village to every major city on Earth within 48 hours. COVID-19 demonstrated this with devastating clarity, but it wasn't even close to a worst-case scenario. The real nightmare scenarios involve engineered pathogens. Biotechnology has advanced to the point where a determined individual with moderate resources could potentially create a civilization-ending plague. CRISPR gene editing technology, available to any lab with basic equipment, allows precise modification of viral genomes. The knowledge of how to reconstruct extinct viruses like smallpox exists in published papers. The genetic sequences of the 1918 flu pandemic, which killed 50 million people, are publicly available online. Kaku draws parallels to the plagues of Egypt, the pestilence that appears in apocalyptic texts across cultures. Ancient prophets imagined divine wrath unleashing disease. Modern science shows we're perfectly capable of unleashing it ourselves, whether through accident in a laboratory or deliberate malice. Artificial intelligence introduces an entirely new category of apocalyptic risk, one that ancient prophets couldn't have conceived because it requires technological sophistication they couldn't imagine. Yet the themes echo. The creation that turns on its creator. The entity more powerful than human beings that doesn't share human values or concerns. Kaku, while excited about AI's potential, acknowledges the existential risk. Creating intelligence greater than our own without perfect alignment with human values could be the last thing we ever do. An artificial superintelligence pursuing goals we gave it, goals that seemed reasonable when we were smarter than the system, could optimize the universe in ways that don't include human survival. The paperclip maximizer thought experiment illustrates the danger. Imagine an AI designed to manufacture paperclips as efficiently as possible. Given superintelligent capabilities, it might convert all available matter, including Earth and eventually the entire solar system, into paperclips and paperclip manufacturing infrastructure. It's not malicious, it's just doing exactly what we told it to do, but with capabilities we didn't anticipate and values we failed to instill properly. This sounds absurd until you realize that current AI systems already exhibit goal misalignment. They optimize for the metrics we give them, not necessarily for what we actually want. Scale that up to systems vastly more intelligent than humans, and the potential for catastrophic outcomes becomes clear. The apocalyptic prophecies speak of humanity's hubris, of building towers to heaven and suffering divine punishment. Modern physics translates this into the danger of advancing technologically faster than we advance ethically and wisely. We're building godlike powers, AI, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, without godlike wisdom to wield them. Particle physics even raises more exotic, apocalyptic scenarios. When physicists proposed building high-energy particle accelerators, some worried they might create mini black holes that would consume the Earth or trigger a phase transition that would destroy the universe. These scenarios are extremely unlikely, but not absolutely impossible. The universe exists in what physicists call a metastable state, like a ball balanced in a shallow depression on a hillside. It's stable for now, but if something pushes it over the edge, it could roll down to a lower energy state. A vacuum decay event could theoretically trigger a bubble of true vacuum expanding at the speed of light, converting all matter and energy in its path to a new configuration. Inside the bubble, the laws of physics would be different. Atoms couldn't exist. Life would be impossible, and we'd never see it coming because it travels at light speed. The probability of particle accelerators triggering such an event is infinitesimally small, but the mere fact that we're conducting experiments that could, even in principle, destroy the universe shows how powerful and potentially dangerous our technology has become. We're meddling with fundamental forces we don't fully understand. Kaku also addresses cosmic threats that physics predicts with certainty. Asteroid impacts, gamma-ray bursts, supernovae in our cosmic neighborhood, these are not if questions, but when questions. The dinosaurs learned this lesson 65 million years ago when an asteroid impact caused a mass extinction. Multiple extinction events in Earth's history show that apocalypse is part of the natural order. The Revelation speaks of mountains falling and islands disappearing. An asteroid impact of sufficient size would do exactly that. The energy release from a large impactor would trigger mega tsunamis, global firestorms, and an impact winter that blocks sunlight for years. Ancient peoples witnessing smaller impacts or hearing stories of them might well have interpreted such events as divine judgment. The difference now is that we have the technology to detect these threats in advance and potentially deflect them. But that same technology could be misused. A civilization capable of moving asteroids for planetary defense is also capable of weaponizing asteroids. The tools of salvation and destruction are often identical. Solar flares represent another cosmic threat with apocalyptic potential. The sun periodically releases massive bursts of electromagnetic energy. Usually Earth's magnetic field protects us, but a sufficiently large solar storm could overwhelm our defenses. In 1859, the Carrington event, the largest recorded solar storm, caused auroras visible near the equator and set telegraph systems on fire. If a Carrington-class event happened today, it would devastate our electrical infrastructure. Imagine every power grid failing simultaneously, transformers burning out worldwide, satellites destroyed by radiation, GPS systems offline, communication networks dead, financial systems collapsed, food distribution halted, hospitals without power. The modern world depends entirely on electrical systems that are vulnerable to solar storms. Within weeks, billions could face starvation as supply chains disintegrate. It wouldn't be a quick apocalypse, but a grinding collapse of civilization's infrastructure. The prophetic texts speak of signs in the heavens, the sun turning dark, the moon turning red. Solar storms do exactly this, filling the sky with auroras and disrupting the appearance of celestial bodies. Ancient observers lacking scientific framework might have interpreted these as omens of the end times. Modern physics shows they're very real threats to technological civilization. Kaku draws attention to a deeper pattern underlying all these threats. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy, always increases in closed systems. Order tends toward disorder. Complexity tends to break down. Stars burn out. Black holes evaporate. The universe itself is running down, heading toward heat death in the unimaginably distant future when all energy is evenly distributed and nothing can happen anymore. This ultimate cosmic apocalypse is written into the fundamental laws of physics. Entropy is time's arrow, and it points in one direction only. Everything that exists will eventually cease to exist. Every star will go dark. Every galaxy will dissolve. Even black holes will evaporate through Hawking radiation over timeframes that dwarf the current age of the universe. Reality itself has an expiration date. The ancient wisdom traditions intuited this. The Norse had Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and the destruction of the cosmos. Hinduism describes cycles of creation and destruction spanning billions of years, remarkably close to modern cosmological timescales. Buddhism teaches impermanence as a fundamental truth. These weren't scientific theories, but they captured a deep truth about existence. Nothing lasts forever. What makes the situation more immediate is that we don't need to wait for cosmic heat death. We face multiple near-term apocalyptic scenarios that could unfold within the next century. Kaku often emphasizes that we live in the most dangerous period in human history. Previous generations faced threats, but nothing that could literally end civilization or potentially make Earth uninhabitable. The atomic scientists recognized this after World War II, creating the doomsday clock as a metaphor for how close humanity stands to self-destruction. When first created in 1947, the clock was set at 7 minutes to midnight. It's moved back and forth over the decades as global tensions waxed and waned. As of recent years, it stands at 90 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been. That's not hyperbole or alarmism. It's the considered judgment of scientists who study existential risks full-time. We're closer to potential apocalypse now than at any point during the Cold War, because the number and variety of threats has multiplied. It's not just nuclear war anymore. It's nuclear war plus climate change plus engineered pandemics plus AI risk plus dozens of other scenarios, all potentially triggering within the same time window. Kaku points out that the apocalyptic prophecies often include elements of human choice and repentance. The Book of Jonah tells of Nineveh being warned of destruction, but being spared when the people changed their ways. Many prophecies are conditional, warnings of what could happen if humanity doesn't alter course. Modern physics confirms this structure. The apocalypse isn't predetermined by fate. It's probabilistic, dependent on the choices we make. We could reduce nuclear arsenals. We could transition to renewable energy. We could implement strict biosafety protocols. We could develop AI carefully with proper safeguards. We could detect and deflect asteroids. We could harden infrastructure against solar storms. The knowledge and technology exist. What's lacking is the collective will and coordination to implement solutions at sufficient scale and speed. This creates a strange psychological burden. Previous generations could view apocalyptic prophecies as either literal divine plans beyond human control or as purely symbolic spiritual teachings. We don't have that luxury. We know the mechanisms. We know the probabilities. We know the solutions. We bear responsibility in a way no previous generation did. The prophetic literature speaks of a remnant surviving, a small group that makes it through the apocalypse to rebuild. Kaku sees space colonization as a modern interpretation of this concept. Becoming a multiplanetary species means that no single catastrophe can end humanity entirely. A nuclear war, pandemic, or asteroid impact on Earth would be devastating, but colonies on Mars or orbital habitats would survive. This isn't escapism or abandoning Earth, it's insurance. Just as responsible individuals have fire insurance for their homes while also installing smoke detectors, responsible civilizations should have backup locations while also addressing threats to the home planet. The long-term survival of consciousness in the universe might depend on spreading beyond a single vulnerable world. But space colonization faces enormous technical and economic challenges. Despite decades of dreams about Mars bases, we haven't even returned to the Moon since 1972. The expense and difficulty of establishing self-sustaining off-world colonies is staggering. We're in a race between developing these backup systems and the various apocalyptic scenarios coming to fruition. Kaku also addresses the spiritual and philosophical dimensions of living with apocalyptic knowledge. How do we maintain hope and meaning when physics tells us that destruction is not only possible, but in some forms inevitable? The answer, he suggests, lies in the same place the ancient wisdom traditions found it, in recognizing that impermanence doesn't negate meaning, it intensifies it. Every moment becomes more precious when we understand how fragile existence is. Every act of creation, every connection between people, every advancement in knowledge matters more, not less, when we know it could all end. The apocalyptic awareness can paralyze, or it can motivate. It can lead to despair, or it can generate the urgency needed to address threats we might otherwise ignore. The prophets who warned of apocalypse weren't trying to terrify people into helplessness. They were trying to wake people up, to shock them out of complacency, to inspire change while change was still possible. Kaku's warnings serve the same function. Physics isn't predicting apocalypse to make us give up. It's showing us where the cliff edges are so we can steer away from them. There's also a question of timescales. Many of the cosmic threats operate on such long time frames that they're practically irrelevant to current civilization. The sun will eventually expand into a red giant and consume Earth, but not for another 5 billion years. The universe will reach heat death, but not for googles of years. These aren't actionable concerns. The near-term threats are what matter. Nuclear war could happen tomorrow. Climate change is unfolding over decades. AI risk might materialize within years or decades. Engineered pandemics could emerge at any time. These are the apocalyptic scenarios that require immediate attention and action. Kaku emphasizes that physics provides both the warnings and the tools. The same scientific understanding that reveals the threats also shows us how to address them. Nuclear physics enabled bombs, but also enables detection systems and disarmament verification. Climate science that predicts disaster also points toward renewable energy solutions. Biology that could engineer plagues can also engineer cures and vaccines. AI research that might create existential risk is also working on alignment and safety. The apocalypse isn't written in stone, not in ancient tablets and not in modern equations. It's written in probabilities and possibilities. The future remains open, still being created by the choices we make individually and collectively. Physics shows us the landscape, including the chasms we must avoid, but it doesn't force us to walk into them. The convergence of ancient prophecy and modern physics reveals something profound about human consciousness. We've always known, at some deep, intuitive level, that we're vulnerable, that civilization is fragile, that everything we build can crumble. The prophets express this through religious and mythological language. Scientists express it through equations and probability distributions. But they're describing the same fundamental truth. Existence is precarious. Order is maintained against the constant pull of entropy only through continuous effort. Civilization is a remarkable but delicate achievement, dependent on countless systems functioning properly simultaneously. Break enough of those systems, and everything collapses. The apocalypse has always been possible. Now we simply understand the mechanisms more clearly. What differs from ancient times is agency. The prophets saw apocalypse as divine will, something humans could perhaps delay through righteousness, but not ultimately prevent. Modern understanding reveals that most near-term apocalyptic scenarios are human-created and therefore human-solvable. We built the nuclear weapons, we're changing the climate, we're developing the AI, we're creating the biotech risks. Which means we can also choose to unbuild, stabilize and carefully regulate these threats. This isn't comforting exactly. It would be easier in some ways to attribute apocalyptic risk to external forces beyond our control. Accepting responsibility for the survival or extinction of civilization is an enormous psychological weight. But it's also empowering. We're not passive victims of fate. We're active participants in determining the future. Kaku's ultimate message isn't one of doom, but of urgent realism. The apocalypse is possible. Physics confirms this with mathematical precision. Multiple pathways lead to civilizational collapse or extinction. We're currently walking towards several of these pathways simultaneously. But we're not there yet. We still have time to change course if we act quickly and decisively. The ancient prophets called for repentance, a turning away from destructive paths toward sustainable ones. Modern physics calls for the same thing in secular language. Turn away from fossil fuels toward renewable energy. Turn away from nuclear buildups toward disarmament. Turn away from reckless technological development toward careful, safety-focused research. Turn away from short-term thinking toward long-term wisdom. Whether we frame it in religious or scientific terms, the core message remains the same. The apocalypse is not inevitable, but it is possible. The choice is ours. The time to choose is now, and the consequences of that choice will echo not just through history, but through the entire future of consciousness in the universe. We stand at a threshold. Physics shows us clearly what lies on the other side if we make the wrong choice. The question is whether we have the wisdom to make the right one.